Again, great to be in the house of the Lord together, isn't it? Yay. Good stuff. Good stuff. I don't want to rub this in, but I did send out an invitation to everyone. I was in North Carolina this week. I like North Carolina. I like all of North Carolina, but I was in my favorite part of North Carolina this week. Yes, I was on a little island at the end of the Outer Banks for a little while. And it was lovely. I don't want to get hung up on that. But one thing I noticed, and it was so weird how the Lord ever whack you with something that seems so innocuous that you would never even think to notice it. It's so weird the way the counties in North Carolina are divided up. The counties are enormous. We noticed that because when we were driving, we thought about it because when we were driving, there were some EMTs were going in the other direction, and we'd been driving on the same road, and these EMTs kept going, and I just started thinking, I wonder how much ground they have to cover, right? Because it's a lot. And those islands, they're long and skinny, right? So there's resources are spread way out thin. But anyway, on the way to getting to the Outer Banks, it encompasses 2 counties. And it's weird because you go into one county on the mainland, and then you go into another county when you get to the Outer Banks, and you're in that county for a really, really long time. And so you go through Hyde County, and you get into Dare County, and then you drive through Dare County for hours, literally hours you're driving in Dare County, until you get to the ferry, and you put your car on the boat, and you float across, and when you get off the boat, you're back in Hyde County, which is weird. So there's these 2 counties that are like all of the most extreme coast, the most eastward coast of North Carolina. You have 2 choices, Dare or Hyde. I'll just give that a minute to soak in. Dare or Hyde? It's Palm Sunday, beginning of Holy Week. I don't like Palm Sunday because Palm Sunday, from the big picture point of view, had to happen. It was a total disaster. There was really only one breathing person on earth that understood what was going on Palm Sunday. And that was heavy. And he had a choice to make. Dare or Hyde. And he kind of waffled on it. Now, yes, the spelling's different. All right, give me some room, but still, okay? Aren't you glad he took the dare? He decided not to hide. Started a week long of highs and lows. And really it was a reflection of his entire ministry. Not Jesus' high and lows, but the people who followed him went through peaks and valleys. And we've been on this short series on crazy people on the way to Calvary, talking about their peaks and valleys, their highs and lows. And I promised you that we were going to talk about Peter today, even though it's Palm Sunday. It's not a perfect match, but if you stay with me all the way through it, I think it fits. Because Peter's ministry, Peter's life with Jesus, and we've been doing, of course, the Chosen study now for a while on Wednesday nights for discipleship, and they've really illustrated it well. But if you look at Peter's life, it is a continuum of being daring and hiding. It switches back and forth between dare and hide. There's no middle ground with Peter. He's all over the place. But he's at one extreme or the other. So that really becomes apparent in Holy Week. I mean, you see it punctuated. And it's not just Peter, it's all of the disciples. But you really see this come to pass in Holy Week. And really, we could be tough on them. I don't recommend you be too hard on them. Because isn't that really life? Isn't our life pretty much like every day we are given a choice to make? Dare or hide? And frankly, friends, most of the time, I just want to hide. Some of you may be more daring than me, but my natural instinct is to hide. So, let's talk about Palm Sunday, because it's Palm Sunday. There are rules about these things. So, you must read Matthew chapter 21. So, I'm just going to give it to you. It's a long passage, but it should be familiar. Matthew 21. As they approached Jerusalem, they being Jesus and his disciples, his followers, including the 12, but also a larger group of people, and the women that we talked about last week. As they approached Jerusalem, they came to Bethpage on the Mount of Olives. Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone asks you anything about it, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. Say to daughter Zion, "See, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So the disciples went, and they did this, and as Jesus had instructed them, they brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowd that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest heaven!" When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" The crowd answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." This whole practice we think is a little weird. But think parade. That's the idea. They're celebrating and they're having a big party. And this practice of putting palm branches on the road was actually kind of a Roman thing. When a Roman soldier came back from winning a big battle, they would lay palm branches and they'd wave palm branches in the air. It actually went further back to Greece, and Romans had borrowed it, and it was a big celebration when a military hero was coming into town. So it's not unusual for them to see this, just inappropriate for the moment. So they're, woo, big celebration, yeehaw, the conquering hero is here, yippee. That's what people are doing. They're very excited, making a big stir. Jesus was welcomed into Jerusalem as the conquering hero, the long-awaited Messiah. Everyone was emboldened to praise the new king. What a celebration that was. Except it really wasn't, because it was the celebration for what wasn't happening. Let that sink in for a minute. It was a huge celebration for what wasn't happening. And Jesus had told them what was happening, and the people did with it what they wanted. They saw what they wanted to see, they heard what they wanted to hear, and they did what they wanted to do. Does that sound familiar? Don't be too hard on them. We do it. So Jesus most definitely was a conquering hero. Don't get me wrong. He was just not the kind of hero they were looking for. It wasn't the kind of hero they were thinking of. Their thinking was too small. And Jesus' view was too long. They didn't want to wait for what he was really doing. Not everything was as it seemed. I don't know, depending on how long you followed Jesus, that's normal. Things are not exactly as they seem. Jesus came as you know, in the most unexpected ways. He did the most unexpected things. He saved in the most unexpected ways, doing unexpected, confusing things. He confused people everywhere because he almost never did what people expected. Who is this guy? Who is this? We've seen this question before. I actually do have this one for you. Chapter 16, starting in verse 13. When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, similar party was going on, not quite as big, but people were happy. There were crowds going ahead. And he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" He replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" He asked, "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered. Of course, Simon Peter answered. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Simon Peter said, sorry, I did that already. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Right answer. Good job. Crazy people on the way to the cross would say something like that. I said, of course Peter answered, because Peter has a reputation. By this point, we know this by this point in our story. Peter has a reputation of what? An idea comes into his head, it comes out of his mouth. You ever met anybody like that? In the mirror? The idea comes into his head, comes out of his mouth, and it gets him in trouble. And we don't know exactly why Peter was the one who answered the question, but contextually speaking, if you're going to get an answer, it's going to come from Peter. Right? First of all. So we gather that Peter was bold. Right? Sometimes we think of Peter as a loudmouth. We always think of Peter as presumptuous. Am I the only one? Like, he's going to give you an answer. He's going to give you the first answer. That's not necessarily to mean that he thought that answer through. But he's going to get you an answer. And in this case, it's the right answer. Very good. But as is so often the case, just because you have the right answer doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. So Jesus here, the next thing Jesus says, and I'm not going to go through it word for word, just trust me on this because I think you know this. Jesus says, essentially, "Well done. And I'm going to call you my rock. And on this rock, I will build my church." I don't know. If somebody said that to me, I would be pretty happy. That's good. You are my rock. I like this. Right? He says, "You are my rock." Daring. Bold. Right answer. God created Peter to be a leader. And Jesus does everything he can to encourage Peter to be a leader. It takes. He has the personality, he has the voice, he's got the notoriety. He's got Jesus. He wants him to lead, and instead, when it gets hard, the only thing that leads Peter is his own fears. And he runs and hides. Don't be too hard on him. Because I don't think I'm being too bold to say, all of us do it. Peter just does it a little bigger than most people, but all of us do it. Knowing the right answer doesn't necessarily mean that you're living the right answer. That's not necessarily. Knowing the right words doesn't necessarily mean that you're living in that way. Let's take a look at Peter's life. Specifically Peter's ministry. Jesus came to Peter and he called him away from his career to be a disciple. And Peter dropped it right there. Daring move. Bold. Okay? He witnessed the miracles and the teachings of Jesus, hung around with Jesus, and watched everything he taught. He walked on the water from Jesus and looked at the water, and then he sank. And so Jesus actually saved him twice in this, because he looked back at Jesus and Jesus called him out. You can look all this up if you want. It's great fun. He called Jesus the Son of the living God. Jesus gave him the nickname the Rock. We just covered that. Peter vows that Jesus will never suffer or be killed. Jesus responds to that by saying, "Get behind me, Satan," metaphorically pointing out that Peter is not listening, he's talking. And he's getting in the way of what God really is doing in this situation. Peter was one of the three that saw the transfiguration. That's a pretty big deal. Rather than just soak it in, he decides to talk. Okay. He caught a fish that had in its mouth the exact amount of money that was for the taxes that were due. You'd think that would rattle you a little bit. Okay, I get that. He was at the Last Supper with Jesus. He promises that he will never fall away from Jesus. And then he falls asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane. What? When he wakes up, he cuts off a guard's ear. You can look all this up. It's great fun. You see what I'm saying? He's all over the place. My point is right there. Peter is inconsistent. He's not bold all the time. He's only bold when it's awkward. When it really matters, he runs and hides. He just doesn't get it. Don't be too hard on him. Because at least he dares to live it out loud. Even when he makes a mistake, he does it out loud, which is still better than hiding. Near the end of Peter's life, he wrote a couple letters. And in those letters, he implores Christians everywhere and for all time. Basically, what those letters say, don't be like me. That's pretty much what 1st and 2nd Peter say. Don't be like me. Be steadfast. Be steady in your faith. Actually, don't just let people call you a rock. Actually, be one. Be steady. If anybody knows about the importance of keeping your faith and how bad it is when you don't, it's Peter. And he writes these letters. Don't be like me. Don't hide. I'll give you an example. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Listen to what this says. Prepare your minds for action. Be self-controlled. What? Who wrote that? Prepare your minds for action. Be self-controlled. Set your hope fully on the grace to be given you when Jesus Christ is revealed. Now, if we were snarky people, I would read that and think, Peter, really? You're telling me? And his answer would be, yes. Yes, I'm telling you, don't be like me. Have to. And if you're snarky, you're going to feel like Peter felt all the time when Jesus said, you know what you said was just dumb. That's what's going to happen, because Peter is saying, don't do it my way. Dare to follow Jesus all the time, in every situation, whatever it is, every circumstance, whatever's coming, stand firm. Be ready. Prepare your minds for action, which means do it in advance. Be ready so you're not shocked when things happen. You're ready. Be prepared, like firefighters and EMTs and the Coast Guard people. They don't figure out what to do in the middle of an emergency. They're prepared. And that was Peter's problem. He had never set his mind on what he was going to do. And don't be too hard on him, because how was he supposed to know what was coming? I mean, really. But now that he does, he writes in this letter to Christians everywhere forever, don't be like me. Be prepared. Set your mind on this. Be self-controlled. In other words, keep your mouth shut until you actually have something to say. But then when you actually have something to say, when your hope is fully set on the grace given to you, I think it's pretty safe that Christians, most Christians I know today, would say that they set their hope fully on Jesus. And then they sit quietly and don't say anything about it. They talk about the weather, they talk about the price of gas, they talk about the price of milk, they talk about everything but the only thing that eternally matters. They hide behind small talk and stuff that's socially acceptable and things that are not offensive, and never dare to get around to the real business. 1 Peter chapter 2. A little deeper into the same idea. 1 Peter 2, starting at verse 4. You have come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God, and precious to him. Tell me you recognize that expression. The living stone. We, in this living body right here, this body of believers, claim this verse as our identity. The living stone. You also, it says in verse 5, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering special sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Hello. We claim this as our identity, a holy priesthood that stands firm, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God. Jump down to verse 9. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Friends, look at what that says. We claim as our identity that we are called to declare the praises of him who brought us out of darkness into his wonderful light. That means we got stuff to do. In this community, we say that this is what we do. Is this what we're doing? We have been made a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Now, speaking of me, some of us are just slow learners, like Peter. I can totally get this guy. All right? Some of us in this way. I was always one to just kind of keep quiet. I've never been much of a blurter until recently. I'll ponder these things. I'm much more of a John. I'll just ponder these thoughts quietly and laugh at Peters of the world. And you know what John was doing throughout all of this? He sits quietly and he's pondering and he's laughing at Peter and thinking, I'm so glad I didn't say that. I was thinking it, but I'm so glad I didn't say it. And then we'll just see what happens. Now, I've never been much of a blurter, but like Peter, I have been kind of a slow learner in this. You know what? I can relate. Peter needed to take the long way home. But he got there. He got there. He suffered a great deal for his shortcomings. His self-reliance cost him dearly in his life. Some people call it arrogance. I don't think it's arrogance, because I think an arrogant person actually believes they've got it together. And I don't read Peter that way. Not at all. I think he was very self-conscious. I think he was trying to prove himself all the time. He wasn't really arrogant. Actually, he had pretty low self-esteem, I think, because he was always trying to prove himself to everybody. He was always trying to prove something. So my heart kind of hurts for Peter, because Jesus called him my rock. But Peter didn't see himself as a rock in the kingdom of God. And so he let himself get pushed around by his own fears. Later on, if you read through Acts, he let himself get pushed around by the Jews, remember? And Paul, the new guy, had to get up in his face and say, look, Pete, no. The new guy. And Peter had to say, you know, you're right. You're right. Which was good of Paul. It was brave. And it was brave of Peter to say, you know what? You're right. See, you see this progression with Peter as he's figuring it out. In the beginning, he's just like, blah, he just blurts out whatever he's saying. And some of the stuff he says is so dense. But as he comes along, you see this exchange. As he's getting older, you see he's teachable. He becomes softer and more malleable. He still doesn't figure it all out, but he's getting there. And then finally, at the end of his life, yes, he had to take the long way home, but finally he gets it. And the only way we know it is the best way we could. He wrote it down and he gave it to us. And he said, please don't do it my way. Please don't do it my way. You are a royal priesthood. Lord, to the world. Make him known. Dare to be different. Don't run and hide like I always did. Don't do that. I'm telling you because I know. Don't do it. Poor Peter. He got it under control. And he wrote it to us. And he didn't narrow it down. He didn't say, I'm writing this letter to this person. He said, I'm writing this letter to Christians everywhere, meaning forever. So it's actually one of the few that's actually written to us. He says, don't do it like me. The rock is encouraging you and me to be living stones. Alive and well and active in the world, steadfast and solid on Jesus Christ. Dare to stand firm. It's Palm Sunday, a day that marks the beginning, for a lot of people, changing their minds about Jesus in the wrong direction. The triumphal entry, we call it. Hardly. I don't think so. Soon, allegiances would be flipped. Illusions would be shattered. From beginning of the week to the end, nothing would be the same. the whole world would turn upside down for the disciples, and most definitely for Jesus. For many, Palm Sunday marked the beginning of the great disappointment. I hope it doesn't for us. Jesus was not who they thought he would be. He wasn't who they wanted. Most of his disciples scattered and abandoned him. In other words, they ran to hide. They didn't understand. They had lived, they had watched, they had listened, they had heard, and they didn't know. They still didn't get it. Don't be too hard on them. There are others of us that are pretty slow learners. So what about you? Who do you say Jesus is? Can he count on you to dare to stand firm? Or are you going to run and hide? It's really not so much about what you say. The words you say, Peter used lots of words. It's not so much about what you say, it's about how you live. Peter was really good at saying the right words. Not so good at living out those words. It's much more about how you live. Does your life match your words? If the answer to that is no, let me surprise you. I want to encourage you. If you think your life does not match the words you say about Jesus, Peter's didn't either. Most of the time. At least not at first. And not in the middle of Jesus' ministry. Certainly not in the Garden of Gethsemane. Or at the cross where Peter was noticeably MIA. He was somewhere under the bed. Hiding. Not even at the empty tomb. But eventually Peter got it. Don't wait for eventually. That's my encouragement for you. It's okay if you have fallen down, if you've messed this up. Let me help you. You're in really good company if you have messed this up. Don't be too hard on them. All of us have messed this up. Don't settle. That's all of what 1st and 2nd Peter is about. Don't settle for someday or worse, close enough. No. Get your relationship right with Jesus now. Don't hide. Dare to actually set your mind ready for action firmly on Jesus. Peter blew it. He learned from that, and it's very important what he wrote to us later. Basically what he says is, no matter what happens, stay with Jesus. That's a good word. No matter what happens, stay with Jesus. I remember one time going to the county fair when I was real little. It was really crowded. This is going to be terrible. Those of you who don't do the math. It was 1976. That's how I remember it, because everything was red, white, and blue. It was the bicentennial, and it was so crowded. In 1976, I was that tall. And my dad said, whatever happens, hold on to my hand. And I probably about ripped his finger off, because I was pretty shy and, not always the bravest, boldest, daring of the wee tots. And my dad was always doing that. In big crowds of people, whatever happens, stay with me. That's what Jesus says. Whatever happens, just stay with me. And that's what Peter is telling us. You might be scared. You might want to go run and hide. Don't do that. Whatever happens, stay with me. Peter says, stay with Jesus. There will be, friends, there's going to be trouble. There is going to be suffering. You will have to be strong and courageous if you're going to be a follower of Christ, because you're going to be swimming upstream. Whatever you do, just stay with Jesus. When he tells us to dare, it's really dare to stay with Jesus. Jesus is doing the heavy lifting here. You get that, right? It's not your responsibility. It's on him, unless you let go of him, and then you're on your own. Trust in Jesus and stay with him. What in the world, Pastor, does the life of Peter have to do with Palm Sunday? Well, both of them illustrate to us that even our worst failures and our biggest misunderstandings can be made right if we dare to trust Jesus. Sometimes we learn more from our failures. Actually, most of the time, we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. Don't waste Palm Sunday. I don't like Palm Sunday because I know what's coming. The people that were actually there didn't know what was coming, even though Jesus told them. They didn't get it. We know what it is, so I don't like it. I'd rather just skip this part. Can we just go straight to Easter? Let me help you. No, we can't, because you don't get Easter if you don't start at Palm Sunday and get through Good Friday. You'll never get to Easter. You need the whole thing. I hope you're following me on this one. Palm Sunday, nobody got this right. Good Friday, everybody ran and found a place to hide. Every failure, hear this, every failure in your life has the potential to be a victory if you just give it to Jesus. Only count your failures if you've given them to Jesus, because that means he's going to do something with them. So don't waste it. Run with it. Give it to Jesus. Don't waste Palm Sunday. Maybe every time in your past that your faith has been challenged, you have found a place to run and hide. Until this point, maybe you've listened to this message and thought, every time that it has really mattered, all I did was run and hide. Maybe that's you. Well, that's the past. Take that to Jesus and leave it there. Take it to the cross and dump it off. Jesus looks forward. And Jesus is in you. Dare to be faithful. Dare to be a rock. This is Holy Week. There's no better time to accept Jesus for who he really is and become fully who he wants you to be. Like living stones. A royal priesthood. A holy nation. Leading people to Jesus. I hope that I've said this enough that you get it. I firmly believe that the only reason I'm breathing is the responsibility to lead people to Jesus. And I realize we have other things to do. But the primary purpose of the fact that we're breathing is to lead people to Jesus. To dare to be a follower of Jesus. Steady, consistent, and fully surrendered to his Spirit and his plans. Who do you say he is? Are you going to dare to be a follower of Jesus? Or are you going to run and hide again? Let's bow our heads. Bow your heads right now and tell the Lord. You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell anybody except God. Tell the Lord that you are done running and hiding from him. Running and hiding him. What we're doing, you realize this, what we're doing when we run and hide, we're not running from God. He's with you. Right? We're not running away from God. We're running God away from the people that need to hear of him. We are running and hiding Jesus from the people who need him the most. And I don't know about you, I don't want to do that. I don't want to run anymore from his plan for my life. And I don't want you to do that either. Dare to stand firm in his power by his grace. Not your own power, not your own grace, that of Jesus. Palm Sunday can be a turning point in your life. Tell the Lord today, by golly, I'm done hiding. I'm going to dare to be a Jesus follower. Knowing that as you're saying that to the Lord, you are asking him to give you the power to follow through. He's already promised that. He's already given you that. All you have to do is accept it and trust it and do it. And stop hiding under the bed. Dare to follow Jesus. Tell the Lord right now, that's what I'm going to do. To God be the glory. Amen. Let's sing another song.